let me read this. Their strength who lie beneath this sod, who went through fire and death to earn at last the accolade of God.
Mm.
Would you like to buy a mattress?
It's such a yeah. It's
Memorial Day
Yeah,
sale.
that's right. It's
Ongoing.
it's night
We're
and
still
day.
having our Memorial Day sale for another week. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
a very excellent welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Table of Content. I am one of your hosts, Albert Saenz, joined as always by the magnificent, the marvelous Mr. Michael Steele, the man of steel. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing well, Albert. I thought maybe you'd say the beardless Michael Steele.
Well, if you go back to the last time you saw Michael Steele on Table of Content, you will see a difference. Beard, no beard. Beard, no beard.
Right.
Spoilers. Michael Steele has no beard. But how's that going? All right? You feel weightless?
Yeah, I feel
Is
great.
your head?
Yeah, exactly. I feel less wise. I feel more just kind of boyish. Or in the words of our 9-year-old daughter, the morning after I shaved, she's like, "You have a bald face." And I thought, I guess that's a fair assessment, right? So
Give it a year. Give it a year.
That's right.
We'll see it again. So if any of you are missing the beard, you can leave comments below. Say how much you miss Michael Steele's beard.
Yeah.
But we're so glad to have you. Today we're going to celebrate Memorial Day. We know it just passed, but we're so close, and it's a day that should be remembered to remember those who have given their lives in service of their country through all the different branches of the military, and not just here in the United States, but really across the world. There's been many who have given their lives to try to fight for justice, for freedom, for defending their country. So today, in honor of that, we're going to look at two poems that we have recorded here at WB Audio Theater some time ago, actually. And we're going to start with one, which is In Flanders Fields, which was a poem written by John McCrae. And then we're going to move on to a poem by Alfred Joyce Kilmer, Memorial Day. So, Michael, which one should we start with?
Let's start with In Flanders Fields. That one was beautiful. It really both are beautiful, and as you were saying, meaningful because of the celebration and honoring those men and women who paid or made the ultimate sacrifice so that we can enjoy the freedoms that we have. So I was just reading it right before we sat down, and it was very existential. The images that are brought to mind are this peaceful fields filled with flowers blowing in the wind. I think of sunlight, maybe blue skies with clouds overhead. And then at the same time, you think about the reality that we're here for a very short amount of time. And then the question becomes, what do we do with our lives? What is really worthwhile, a worthwhile use of our lives? And the example of these men and women in the military who make the ultimate sacrifice teach us a lesson, so to speak, about what life is all about, giving their lives for someone else or for a cause.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways.
The poem it's a very short poem, and probably just sort of, we want to invite you to listen to the recording of it. I'll have links below in the description. So please go and listen to In Flanders Field. It was read by Grace Beislein. But I'll just sort of read through kind of the sections here. We'll start with the first, is it a stanza, right? Is that what it is?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. And you're immediately given the imagery, right? So we're on either a field where soldiers have died, or maybe like a military cemetery, but probably more in lines with a field where a battle was fought,
Mm.
and there was crosses that were erected to memorialize these soldiers.
Right.
Uh, so, but you have this juxtaposition of life and death, right? Because you
Right.
have these particular flowers, poppies, you have birds that are singing,
Yeah.
but then you have, the guns below, scarce heard amid the guns below, right? So these
Mm.
soldiers with their guns and the battle that sort of is still kind of ongoing through time and history. So death is ongoing, the memory of death, the memory of this battle of war. Because it says, I believe that the author John McCrae, he said he wrote the poem during World War One.
Hmm.
Um, so after presiding over the funeral of a friend and fellow soldier. Um, so his experience was sort of firsthand, right? He lost someone. The World War One was a huge event
Mm.
in the history of the world.
The war
Um,
to end all wars, right? The
right.
the Great War, right?
So death is still very prominent in his mind, most likely, right?
Yeah.
All of these soldiers. I mean, I don't know the numbers. I can guesstimate that it was thousands upon thousands
Hmm.
that gave of themselves in that world war.
Right.
So it's like the battle, but the battle below, right, is still ongoing. You can't hear those guns,
Hmm.
but life is ongoing on top.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm reading the little write up here. It says the usage of red poppies as a way to commemorate service members who died in the war was inspired this poem. Yeah. So,
Interesting enough, for the first time, someone at church just last weekend, one of the older gentlemen at our parish was handing out sort of handmade little poppies with a little like Memorial Day sticker,
oh,
and
wow.
we didn't know
Yeah.
about it,
Huh.
and then we sort of found the connection. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it's a nice little tribute, sort of attachment to Memorial Day.
Right. Right. And you think that when this was written, John McCrae has lived 1872 to 1918. You know, locally in town, as I was driving here, I passed by a cemetery and I was struck at the same time by that juxtaposition that you were mentioning, the beautiful spring flowers, the birds, the wildlife, the trees. And yet, here are these tombstones made out of granite, a lot more enduring, and you think about, you know, what there's this one saying, I hope I don't botch it, but what they once were, I will be one day, right? That idea of like they're reminding us that life has an end, for all of us, whether we like it or not, right? And again, the question that becomes, what is the good life, or what is worthwhile in life, right? Since it's so short and so brief, right?
Hmm.
And there's nothing, I think, that will evoke those kind of existential questions more than attending a funeral, but then also attending a funeral of a soldier who knew the risks going into battle and faced death. I think that that's really what every soldier has to face when they enlist or sign up. The idea is like, well, um, I will have a real possibility of having to make that ultimate sacrifice of laying down my life for my country, right? Whereas the words of G.K. Chesterton, he said the soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. That
Hmm.
idea of like,
Hmm.
making that intentional sacrifice. Yeah, the bravery. There is a real bravery involved. So,
Well, sure, sure. I mean, you hear the stories, certain conflicts and wars aside, and but you hear the stories of the young men who you know, volunteered to take up arms and to
mm,
fight with their fellow, brother in arms, and fight for their country, to fight for uh, to protect their families, their land, and
right.
you think about the idea, it seems it seems kind of hard to maybe think about it, especially in today's times, like volunteering to go and fight in a war, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Uh, and many people still do. Many people still enlist into the military, and they know what they're doing. They know the sacrifice that they're potentially going to be called to.
Sure.
Um, and it is a great call and a great honor, I think, that should be remembered for these people.
Yeah, it's a sign of respect and honor. And I was thinking as well, like why do we do this on Memorial Day? Why do we honor? And I was thinking the Latin root of the word honor is onos, which means esteem or respect or dignity as well. So, and none of those are just kind of given; they're earned. Like, why do we honor those who gave their lives? Well, it's precisely because life is so precious. We have one life, only one chance to live it, and then to sacrifice it in defense of what you believe is good for your fellow citizens, brothers and sisters. That's really, it harkens to that um, the gospel teaching where Jesus says, "No greater love has a person than to lay down their life for someone else." Right? I'm not saying that every soldier is de facto, because then you get into moral decisions and things like that. But in general, there is a nobility in the life of a soldier in wanting to show their respect and devotion to the country by defending it, right? Um, and then also, as you were saying, yeah, war. Wouldn't it be great if we could live in a world without war? I
Oh,
mean,
of course.
right?
Yeah, where we didn't have to have fields
Right.
of crosses or white tombstones that were filled and filled and filled with those who gave their life.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that'd be great to not have
Yeah.
war,
Yeah.
but
That's not the reality.
that's not the reality,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
In the second section says,
Mm,
we are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. And I think many times, especially in this sort of scenario, again, where we talk about where there's thousands of soldiers that have died, thousands and thousands and thousands of soldiers who have died. And it can be, I think, a bit overwhelming.
mm,
And all we sort of see is death
yeah.
and the representation of death. And and we should be overwhelmed by that much loss of life. We shouldn't sort of pass over it lightly and say, "Oh, well,
Right.
it's just 10,000 men that gave their life." We shouldn't do that. But uh, I think that we can be overcome by it and forget that there was that they had lives, right? They
Right.
they they lived, they felt dawn, they saw sunset glow, and I appreciate that John McCrae didn't sort of say, we went to work and we ate food and we did these sort of
Right.
worldly things. He
Yeah.
said we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved.
Yeah.
Some of these very sort of deep experiences of life
Right.
to really sort of separate it from now within death, right, where they're not.
Right.
I'm not talking about eternal life here. We're talking about the
Sure.
concept of death is now devoid of the warmth of the sun, of loving one another.
Right.
You know,
Right.
because I think if you just tried to sort of say, you know, oh, we played cards and we hunted. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
but no,
We shared a beer
we
at the
shared a beer,
the local bar.
right,
Right.
at the
Yeah.
local pub or
Yeah.
wherever it
Right.
was. But instead, it's very much a deep experience of life that they had.
Right. It's not superficial. Right. Everyone is moved by a beautiful dawn. Right. Everyone is moved by a beautiful sunset. Right. There's just the truth and the beauty and the goodness of reality. Like, I think you made a great point, has different levels, and our participation in that also has different levels. And so you can't really compare you know, as nice and as pleasant as it is to share a beer with a drinking buddy or something, that compared to a sunset where you're really drawn out of yourself and you're really, contemplate the horizon, and a sunset can move us more profoundly, than say a Yingling, you know. Not, anyways, but and then also talking about how we were loved and were loved, right? And now we lie in Flanders Field. That idea, like, what is the one human action that we're capable of that no one else is capable of, or no other creature on earth is capable of? It's the act of love, that we can give ourselves as a gift to another human, or another person, God or human, right? And also receive that other person as a gift, right? And and I feel like in our culture that's so kind of like sexualized, we kind of just go straight to that aspect of it. But no, that's really, again, the nobility of a soldier. Like, you can love someone, a citizen, i.e. you and me, 20, you know, 20, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, right? Or 100 years later, by making that act of self-giving. Um, maybe not directly, but at least indirectly.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
The last section here. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep though poppies grow in Flanders Field. And I want to. I'm not a World War One historian,
Hmm.
but I think war in general, even when a war quote unquote ends, right?
Hmm.
The whatever it was that caused the war, the aggressor, the tensions, the affront to whatever country that started, that sort of goes on, right? That section, and here, I think a lot of people really felt the pain and the anger of what started the war and who the aggressor was, right? And to
Right.
say that the dead are still calling out, like, take up the fight, you
Right.
know, because if you don't, then we won't be able to sleep. You know,
Right.
I'm not an advocate for continuing, war and the destruction of people, as it is, right? Trying
Mm.
to a just war. It's so hard to label any war just. Somehow it could happen, but
Right.
so, but that being said, the the dead who are yearning to have the their fight continued,
Yes. Right.
or else we will never rest.
Right. Yeah. You know, Bishop Robert Barron has a great take on that in his a little documentary on Saint Augustine. His sort of just war theory emanates from Saint Augustine. And I remember this one quote, Bishop Barron saying that it wasn't like Augustine was trying to, like, make something evil into a good. What he was trying to do with the just war theory is to bring the light of the gospel into the depths of human wickedness and into the depths of human evil, right? And even there in those dark places, try to shed some light, try to at least bring that evil into, or a little bit closer to, the truth, the goodness, and beauty, right? And yeah, but yeah, and you think about in the context of World War I. I'm not a historian either, but yeah, there were a lot of unresolved issues, and which ultimately led to World War II, right? So, but but if you wanted to go just sort of at a broader level, like the soldiers who gave their lives, no matter what the specific conflict was, there is that quarrel with the foe, and that also strikes at the human, our human experience. We're always struggling, and sometimes the foe is our very own sort of self, right? And if we're striving to be excellent, right, take up our quarrel. There's always that idea of I don't know, sometimes the excellent life is difficult to achieve, or excellence in general is difficult to achieve. It requires struggle, it requires overcoming obstacles, it requires conquering fears, conquering even enemies who would not want to see us flourish, things like that. So yeah, so that idea of like struggle is just goes hand in hand with the condition of humanity after the fall of Adam and Eve, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, yeah,
So, I mean, really, an excellent poem here by John McCrae, and
yeah,
again in Flanders Fields, and a tribute to his friend, but probably to all the soldiers who gave their life, and across probably many fields where the war was fought. You know, many that were killed and buried, but
right.
that hopefully that they would be remembered for their sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we do on Memorial Day, right?
Right.
Yeah, we pray for their souls and we pray for world peace.
Please, please. So, as we this last section here of the episode, will cover Memorial Day, literally a poem called Memorial Day by Alfred Joyce Kilmer, and I'll just kind of again, please go listen to it, read by Scott Walton, and
Thank you,
but
Scott.
thank you, Scott. Uh, but I'll just sort of go through it here, the whole one, then we can sort of open it up. The bugle echoes shrill and sweet, but not of war it sings today. The road is rhythmic with the feet of men at arms who come to pray. The rose blossoms white and red on tombs where weary soldiers lie. Flags wave above the honored dead, and martial music cleaves the sky. Above their wreath-strewn graves we kneel. They kept the faith and fought the fight. Through flying lead and crimson steel, they plunged for freedom and the right. May we, their grateful children, learn their strength who lie beneath this sod, who win through fire and death to earn at last the accolade of God. In shining rank on rank arrayed, they march the legions of the Lord. He is their captain unafraid, the Prince of Peace who brought a sword. Yeah, that last section, you know, you can sort of you kind of I was feeling it, right? The
Yeah,
all of these soldiers now being led by Christ, you know.
that's right. Yeah. The Prince of Peace,
Yeah.
right? He brings peace, and right. Yeah. He is their captain, unafraid, the Prince of Peace who brought a sword.
But that's important. It's such an important title to remember in the midst of a poem that is talking uh, about those who gave their life in fighting at war, right?
Mm.
And now they're saying we're led by our captain unafraid, the Prince of Peace. Not he is their captain unafraid, the destroyer of kingdoms. You know, that's not what it says.
No.
You know, it says the Prince of Peace who brought a sword.
Right.
Again, another juxtaposition. It's like, well, how can a leader who's not afraid, a peaceful prince who brings a sword?
Yeah.
You know, the intensity of Christ as the great leader, as the Prince of Peace,
Yeah.
you know. So
Right.
somehow the sword is still a very necessary uh, weapon of Christ,
Yeah.
but for the sake of peace, you know, not
Yeah.
for not for destruction and not for death, not for
Yeah.
annihilation, not
Right.
for tyranny, you
No.
know. No, it's a sword that I bring, that Christ brings for peace.
Yeah. Yeah. There's again also that strange dynamic, again, going back to Augustine and understanding like fighting, the dynamic of fighting, of struggling for good. And, we're created for the good. Our wills are hardwired for the good. And life is one of the most precious goods out there, right? So, of course, we have not only do we have the right, but we also have the obligation to defend that good when others seek to take it, right? And so Christ is the first defender, he's the savior. He's the one who defends us from the evil one, our enemy, the foe. And or he's the one who defends us from sin ultimately and death. And he died from the cross to do that, right? So he's in that sense very much of a hero figure, right? Of someone who marches fearlessly to do battle, right? And I feel like this is maybe a bit tangential, but I feel like every good fairy tale models that kind of struggle of good and evil and good conquering evil. Conflict at times necessary, right? So, yeah, the Prince of Peace who brought a sword, right? He brings peace, or, we heard like peace is the tranquility of order, right? Well, there are disorderly forces out there that Christ fights against,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
helps us fight against as well, right? Yeah,
Right.
really
Right.
beautiful.
I like again, we're sort of introduced with flowers again,
Mm,
but the rose blossoms white and red on tombs where weary soldiers lie. You know, in that white and red, right? Sort of white, purity, life, red, blood. But both
yeah,
very tied together.
yeah,
You know, and it's I believe this is not meant to be some sort of patriotic symbolism, more as it is just a representation again of life and death,
yeah,
right? And these flowers that bloom around these graves,
right,
um,
yeah,
and the flags wave above the honored dead, and martial music cleaves the sky, right? So another way, in this very specific one, talking about Memorial Day, right? Those who gave their life in war, in battle are being honored,
yeah,
and we can see these types of things, right? We can go down and we can see flags being put up, around cemeteries, people remembering all the soldiers and putting flags.
yeah,
Some of the veterans bands find different places that they play, and you can hear
yeah,
the brass instruments and the drums,
right,
and it's in honor of them. It's in
right,
honor of those who gave their life.
right,
It said
yeah,
through flying lead and crimson steel, they plunged for freedom and the right.
right,
Who went through fire and death. I mean, it's such strong imagery.
yeah,
And
it
now
is.
the flags fly for them. And the
Yes,
sun shines down on them, and the music is playing for them, for what they did, for their sacrifice.
right, yeah. Right, as you were talking, Albert, I was thinking about the virtue of patriotism, right? It seems like patriotism gets such a bad rap nowadays, but it's okay to love your country. And in fact, we're obligated to love our country. Now, what does that mean? That we stand by whenever the country does whatever it wants? No, we want what's best for the country, wants what's good for the country, right? And that's the real virtue of patriotism, is to build one's own homeland up by virtue, by our good actions, by avoiding evil, right? And it's not just kind of like this carte blanche, like endorsement of my country,
Hmm.
right? So, right. So, I think, as you were saying, this poem points to, right, these men and women who exercise that virtue of patriotism, like you were saying, and it evokes that all the pageantry and all the external elements that we do to honor them, with it says the martial music cleaves the sky. You think of a John Philip Sousa march, and it's just like it stirs the soul, right? Um, I remember growing up, yeah, is either 4th of July or also on Memorial Day weekend, our parents would play a lot of John Philip Sousa marches. So, yeah, bugles echoes shrill and sweet, but not of war, it sings today. Oh,
I I I really feel like you know, Memorial Day in Flanders Fields, they put the right perspective on Memorial Day, because unfortunately, secular society has hijacked. Memorial Day. Come in for our Memorial Day sale, Coming
That's
to get a brand new
right.
mattress on our Memorial Day sale,
75% off
And
everything.
and the the mother and father who lost their children, like maybe they lost multiple children,
Mm, right.
on Memorial Day, are they thinking about buying a new mattress? Going down to the local hardware store to get a good deal on a barbecue pit,
Right.
And, we use it as a holiday, get off from work maybe, depending on where you are, and or maybe you need to work on Memorial Day because you have to sell a mattress, like,
Mhm. Right.
and, like, do you even know what Memorial Day is? Do you know why you're off? Do you know what we're supposed to be doing?
Right.
But it's an opportunity to make a buck,
Yeah.
It's like, well, wait a second. Let me read this. Their strength who lie beneath this sod, who went through fire and death to earn at last the accolade of God.
Mm.
Would
Mhm.
you like to buy a mattress?
It's such a yeah. It's night.
Memorial Day
That's
sale,
right. It's
ongoing.
it's night
We're
and
still
day.
having our Memorial Day sale for another week. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
and
And now it's also culturally become the unofficial beginning of summer, right? So it's
right,
like your barbecue, hot dogs, hamburgers, beer, and all that, which is fine, right? But there is that tendency when you have these celebrations, these cultural celebrations, there's a temptation, as you were saying, to lose sight of the deeper meaning that inspired the celebration in the first place.
right,
And so now, as a culture, it feels like we just want to celebrate and we will use any excuse to celebrate, right? National Rainbow Trout Awareness Day, right? Yay, let's go, right? Sorry, without trying to trivialize it, but it seems like as a culture, we have this deep desire to want to celebrate, and that's good, but let's make sure that our deeper reasons for our celebration are actually forefront for the why behind the what, if
right,
you will.
right,
Yeah, I like
right.
that. Great point you made. Yeah.
So again, I think Alfred Joyce Kilmer did an excellent job, and
Mm,
very sort of poignant here, really on the God aspect of it. Sort of more so uh, than was done in Flanders Fields,
mm,
um,
right.
and as we close here, I just think this is a good way just to remember the dead, that now they march in the legions of the Lord. They've sort of they fought in an earthly army.
Mm,
Now they're
hmm.
part of a heavenly one with Christ at the head,
Yeah.
and that we all will have an opportunity to march with Christ, the Prince of Peace. Uh, so I think it's a good way for us to be reminded on Memorial Day.
Mm,
It doesn't have to only be Memorial Day, because I said it just passed for us, but that we take time to pray for those who made the sacrifice, and that now that they have peace, and that now they're part of a different army, and that they have found Christ,
mm,
and to remember that there are thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the world who gave their life,
mm.
and many of them may not have anyone to pray for them, but we can pray for
Right.
them.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be just on Memorial Day. But very, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about two poems: In Flanders Fields by John McCrae and Memorial Day by Alfred Joyce Kilmer. I'll have those links in the description. Um, so take an opportunity to listen to those, and maybe you have those who you remember. Um, we will surely do our best to remember those who have given their life and the sacrifice. Michael Steele, thank you as always. Such a great honor to talk with you, and a good pleasure. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Albert. This has been helpful for me as well. It's deepened my sort of, even though Memorial Day has passed, like it's deepened my understanding, hopefully celebration of Memorial Day.
Right,
So,
right. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table of Content. We hope that you will return for more Table of Content, where we continue to discuss all things We Are One Body Audio Theater. Until the next time, be good, stay safe. Peace.
peace.